So today's Gospel reading continues on from last week, and we are listening to Luke's version of the Beatitudes. And in Luke it's called the Sermon on the Plain. In Matthew, many of us are familiar with the Matthew Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, where Matthew says, "Blessed are the meek, blessed are the hungry, those who thirst for righteousness." Those are the Beatitudes we tend to be a bit more familiar with. But this is, in a sense, Luke's version, the blessings. And in Luke's it occurs on the plain. But to some degree, Luke's version could be argued that it's a bit punchier, a bit more direct. Last week, you may recall, we had the blessings and the woes. Blessed are you who do this, blessed are you who do this and that. But woe to you who do this, and woe to you who do that. So we see this contrast, and today we get some really punchy, direct, teachings. One of them being, love your enemies. It's not just good enough to love those who love you, but even you are required to love those who do not love you. So I want to fast forward for a second. There's a passage in the Passion narrative. So we're going to fast forward to Good Friday morning, where Jesus is in the temple being interviewed by the high priest, and he gives an answer that the servant thinks is disrespectful. And the servant strikes Jesus across the face. Now, Jesus refuses to be cowed, even in that situation where he knows he's on trial for his life. Even though he knows he's going to his death, he does not allow wrongdoings to go unchecked. He turns to the man who struck him, and he asks the man to justify what he had done. In Jesus' words, "If there is something wrong in what I said, point it out. But if there is no offence in it, why do you strike me?" So we end up with this kind of, we've got the teachings of Jesus about, turn the other cheek, and love your enemy, love your neighbour, love your enemy. But then we also have the lived example of Jesus, where when he was struck on the cheek, we don't know if he offered the other one, but he still held that person to account for the wrongdoing. He wasn't cowed. He didn't remain silent. He didn't shy away. I've said this numerous occasions, is that meekness and weakness are two different things. So when we are called to love our enemy, we are not called to be weak. If we follow the example of Jesus, Jesus was anything but weak in his interactions with the leaders of the day and those people who were doing the wrong thing. So when Jesus says, love your enemies, I believe love is the power to deal with every person in an honest and open manner. We know that there are some horrendous atrocities in the world. Sexual abuse, domestic violence, the list goes on and on. When Jesus says, love your enemies and forgive, I think we need to be aware of what that might look like. And this is what I believe Jesus, the example of Jesus, when he turned to the person who struck him and called that man to justify his actions, called him to account. So this passage is fairly early on in Jesus' ministry, in Luke's Gospel. It occurs in chapter 6, so it's fairly early on. And the teaching in some degree, whilst I suppose hopefully you'll forgive me. Often I think Matthew is this wonderful, blessed are these people, blessed are these people, blessed are these people. Luke is a bit more, yes, these are the people that are blessed, but woe to you who do these things. And so this passage, whilst it is attractive and appealing of love your enemies, yes, I like to think that I can extend God's love even to people who hate me. It can be beguiling in some sense as Christians to think that we are beyond the brokenness of this world. So my question is can it possibly be done? Is it truly possible to love our enemies? To love people who hate us? We live in a fair amount of security in Australia. We are well aware, hopefully, what's going on in the Ukraine with war on a knife edge. Is it truly possible to love our enemies? Are these just words? Well, thankfully, as Christians, we are people of the way of Jesus. We are people of the faith, and we believe all things are possible through God. Not in our own power, in our own energy, but through God, all things are possible, even that of loving those who hate us. So, in one sense, it's easy to forgive little things. It's easy to forgive one another, especially those people we care about, that we have an ongoing relationship with. You know, if you steal my seat, or if you drink out of my coffee cup, or my teacup, I can forgive you. Hopefully you can forgive each other for those little things, you know. Someone cuts you off, and then you realise it's somebody you know. It's probably easier to forgive that person than the complete stranger when they cut you off in traffic. But it's often easy to forgive on the little things. But what about the bigger things? Often it's much harder for us to truly forgive and to love our enemies or those who hate us. Often that may be beyond our own abilities. So why should we even try? Why should we do good to those who hate or hurt us? If it is beyond our natural ability, possibly. I am who I am. God loves me with all my flaws and failings. Well, the answer that we need to be aspiring to that higher level is because the Lord is asking us to become something very different in this world. We are being asked to become children of the living God. And we cannot presume to be children of the living God if we do not listen and follow the teachings of Jesus. And Jesus is calling us to love even those who hate and hurt us. Not going to necessarily be easy. Following Jesus has its challenges, but that is what we are called to do. And in the gospel reading today, we heard God is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. And again, we see a similar passage reflected in Matthew, where God causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. It's not for us to judge. We are called to love our neighbour, even when those neighbours don't love us in return. So why should we be good to those who hate and hurt us? Because we're being asked to do so by our living God. It is important, though, I think, that we look at this concept of forgiveness and loving those who hurt us in practical terms. We're not being asked to give in to others, their evil or their wickedness. As I mentioned earlier, there are some atrocities in the world: domestic violence, sexual abuse, abuse of First Nations peoples, elder abuse. The list goes on and on and on. Genuine scourges in society. Loving our neighbour and forgiving our neighbour doesn't necessarily mean absolving them of consequences. Actions have consequences, and often those consequences are part of the process of justice and healing. As an example, many of you, or some of you, may be aware that the op shop down in town, our op shop, has been broken into at least twice, I think, in the last 6 to 12 months. And my understanding is it's been by youth, throwing rocks through the window, gaining entry, then to see if they can find any cash in the drawer. We don't leave cash in the drawers overnight. But part of this process wasn't just saying, we're church, we forgive you, all is done, go on your way. Joy, I don't know if Joy's here, she probably is going to hate me for actually mentioning it, Joy at the back. Joy is part of what's called a restorative justice process, where we were approached, and Joy was, as the manager, she met with the perpetrator. And this is part of the consequence of that person's actions, of understand who they impact through the damage that they do. They're not just throwing a brick through a window. There are volunteers who give up their time. There are people who donate to the op shop. There's so many more people that are impacted, the good that the op shop does. This is part of the restorative process action. There is a consequence, not punitive, not we want this person to really regret having done what they've done and to experience the pain that we've experienced. We're not looking for punitive actions. Restorative justice process is about helping them understand their actions. And so this was part of the consequence. There are many perpetrators of evil. As Christians, we are called to love those who hate us and who hurt us. But we are also called, as Jesus in his life, to call them to account, not to be cowed by them, not to remain silent, not to walk away because we think meekness needs to be weakness. So it's important that if you are hurt, if you are carrying a burden, and you hear this passage, love your enemies, and you go, well, that just can't be me. Perhaps it can be you if you follow the process of calling those people to account and the consequences of their actions. Jesus called that man who struck him in the face, even on the morning that he was to be crucified, he called that man to account. If I've done something, said something wrong, point it out. But if not, justify your actions. Why did you strike me? Jesus would never remain silent, even if it was an injustice against somebody else. He would not let the wrongdoings go unchecked. The work of justice is vital for us all. But justice is only the beginning of the healing work that is needed. So what role, in a sense, does the church have? The living body of Jesus, the hands and feet of Jesus, the eyes and ears of Jesus, the mouth that speaks for Jesus. What role do we have when evil and wrongdoings is perpetrated, either against us individually, the church collectively, or people who've got nothing to do with the church? What role do we have for standing up and speaking out against those injustices? I would say that we have a very significant role still to play if we see that we are children of God, called to follow an example of Jesus, to love our enemies, but also to speak out against injustice and wrongdoings. But if I can just, as I conclude, if I can just bring it back personally for a moment to us individually. Sometimes when we have been wronged by ourselves, these deep hurts are often too great for us to bear and to let go. But it is not through our own strength that we are called to do this. It is through God's strength. And so we need God's grace to help us cope with the wrongdoings that we have experienced. Never forget that we have God walking with us, alongside us in the good times, but also in the bad times, in the valley of the shadows. So just to finish up, in the end, Jesus was put on the cross. But even when he was on the cross dying, he prayed for the people that had put him there. He prayed for them to be forgiven because they did not understand the terrible things that they did. We still see the example of Jesus' love. Love is the power that heals. Love is the power that mends broken relationships. Love is the power that helps bring healing to a very broken world. And so may we all find the strength to love those who don't love us. May we find that strength through God and be the children of God. Amen.